Good morning, everybody. It is October 9th, 2023, 8:45 a.m. Thank you all for joining me today. And I hope that everyone is safe and doing well. Obviously, the events over the weekend were pretty horrific in terms of what is going on within Israel and Palestine. And we've got a lot to talk about. Now, I first want to preface this before I get into this saying that the obvious, I am not a geopolitical expert. I think I have a grasp of the Israel-Palestine situation better than a lot of people. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it. I don't have a PhD in it or anything, but I have studied it for the past couple of years. I actually have some experience working within it when I was in high school, and I did high school debate. You have to learn a lot about the history in order to debate effectively. So I do want to kind of share, some personal experiences and perspectives on that. As I'm covering this conflict, which I believe I'll be covering probably for the better half of the entire year, probably going into 2024. My objectives here are going to be trying to be incredibly, essentially objective on what's going on here. I am not going to take a side on this. I do not want to try to take sides. There's obviously various different perspectives to give here. My job is to kind of present what's going on and then say the impact that it has on markets. Obviously, this is one of the most interesting scenarios we've seen from a geopolitical perspective ever since Russia-Ukraine. And in that scenario, there was sort of the objective, bad thing that was happening around Russia invading Ukraine and causing all of these problems. And I think we can agree what Hamas is doing in Israel is not a good thing at all. So the question becomes, how do we impact it and how do we analyze it in the context of markets? And really, what is the market going to assume in regards to it being contained? The Russia-Ukraine war has lasted over the past 18 months. We really haven't seen any end to that war, even though we've seen it calm down a little bit. And the unfortunate thing is it seems like this Israel-Palestine scenario is not going to be ending anytime soon. The hope is that it does end sometime soon, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen based on what's going on. So my job as I'm covering this over the next weeks, and honestly, I would imagine months, this is going to be a story that is going to last, is trying to be as objective as possible, trying to present both sides, trying to understand why this is happening, present some historical perspectives. Again, part of being a person who does a morning stream is being educated about this stuff to the best of my ability. And I spent a long time this weekend listening and trying to understand a lot of perspectives and hopefully give you, everyone who comes here, a better understanding of what's going on, how it impacts the market, how it impacts investing, and how we keep going from there. One of the things I don't want to do is become incredibly emotional about this subject. Obviously, it's a horrific thing that has happened. Me picking a side and becoming an activist for either side is not going to do anyone any good. And I don't think you as the audience want me to be an activist. You want me to present the news the best I can, hopefully analyze it the best I can in the context of markets and keep moving from there. And so that is my goal. In the chat, you can pick a side if you want to pick a side, whatever it may be. And when I say pick a side, yes, objectively, we all think there is one side. But then if you look at the protests that were happening in New York City, which is, I live 20 minutes away from it, yesterday, there's obviously a lot of people that feel a different way. So it is one of those very complex, intricate geopolitical subjects. And my job, hopefully, is going to be to break it down and give the best perspective I can via a news understanding of it versus trying to be super emotional about it. And so that's my goal, getting into this. But nonetheless, you've got to cover it. This is the job of being a news reporter, a journalist in this world. Everything affects the stock market. Things are macro-political, geopolitical things always coincide. They intersect at its very core. CNBC, as I was watching for 5 hours this morning, this was the subject because this subject affects everything else. And so it's something we have to talk about. We have to get into. And it's going to just be a question of how well we can analyze this stuff going into what's going on with the markets. All right, let me just give a shout out to everyone here in the chat, and then we'll keep going from there. Miami Ren, Casper, Robert Santidge, John, Phil. Phil says, morning from the UK, interesting thumbnail choice. Okay, so for the thumbnail, I just typed in war on Canva, and I was like, oh, fighter jets. I can, that in my face, that describes what's going on today. That's, we'll just, that'll be the thumbnail. That's hopefully not too bad of a thumbnail. So that's what I did. Felicia, Brian, Zelena, SP, Sethi Roth, Maro, Tobor, Hakun, Jem, Peter, thank you again for the $5 super chat. You're doing this every single day. It means the absolute world to me. Looking forward to hearing all your thoughts on this. Thank you for being here, Peter. Theo J, PA James, Invisible Voices, Rajan, Ricardo Flores, Freddie, Jonathan, Zermatt Holdings LLC, June, Socrates, Silver Fox, Dexter, Tyler, morning from your basement. Tyler, you're always stuck in my basement for some reason. You know, my mom spends a lot of time in the basement organizing her walk-in closet, so I hope you like seeing all of her clothes there. By the way, she's ordering so much stuff from Shein. Bro, I feel like we're like Shein's biggest customer. That Chinese app, she's like, every day we just have more clothes from Shein. Colin, Matt Blake, Monty, thank you all for being here. All right, so let's get into it and let's start discussing what's going on from here. First off, I want to give a TLDR and an overview to what's happening in the Israel-Palestine scenario or the situation that's going on right now. And then we'll start talking about the impact it has on the markets. Essentially, at its very core, Israel and Palestine have been disagreeing on who owns or who has the right to the Holy Land that is currently classified as Israel since 1948. There has been many wars, and 50 years ago in 1973, on the day of Yom Kippur, there was a surprise attack by Palestine and by different groups in Palestine. 50 years later, the reason this has happened is not only because of the geopolitical tensions that have been going on, honestly, for the past almost a century now, in terms of who has access to the land. Is it Palestine? Is it Israel? It's also a deeper understanding of what Israel has been doing with Saudi Arabia. So some of you may have heard this, some of you may have not heard this, but Israel and Saudi Arabia were getting very close to peace talks. Mohammed bin Salman, I might be saying his name wrong, I'm sorry for that, just a week ago did an interview with Fox News, basically saying we're in good discussions with Israel. What are those discussions? To establish diplomatic relations with Israel in a way that would create the supply of oil to be much more stabilized, and that would allow trade within those two nations to happen in a much more meaningful way. Now, you may be asking yourself, why does Saudi Arabia actually care, right? Why does Saudi, there is a huge history before 1948, 100%. There's a lot of history going back to 600 AD. So 1948 was officially when a lot of things got settled down, and people disagree with how it got settled down, but there has been wars since then. 1967, there was a Six-Day War. 1973 was the 50 years ago where there was a terrorist attack. So obviously this conflict has been going on for a very long time. Saudi Arabia and what the Saudi wants and what the prince wants to do in Saudi Arabia is essentially settle all this shit, right? He's been tired of this for a long time. He realized he's not a fan of Israel. He's not a fan of a democratic nation being within the Middle East. A lot of those Middle Eastern countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc., they don't really embrace Western democracy the way Israel has embraced Western democracy. And as a result of that, he wanted to finally have some negotiations with Israel to have some peace so that he can move forward on his plans of making Saudi Arabia one of the most amazing countries in the world. Now, the problem with this is that Iran doesn't like this happening. And so the reports the Wall Street Journal put out this weekend, and I think it's pretty obvious as what's been going on, is Hezbollah, the organization in Iran, has likely been helping fund Hamas because they don't have any money. Hamas is the terrorist group that exists in Palestine to be able to conduct this attack. And so a lot of what has been going on is not just the geopolitical tensions that have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years between Israel and Palestine, but rather the breaking point of Israel and Saudi Arabia coming to a potential peace treaty that has now led Iran to help trigger some of these attacks to become more mainstream. And as a result of that, Saturday morning, I think you guys woke up, and I don't know if anyone expected it. There was a massive terrorist attack in Israel. Hamas flew in through paragliders, which is just insane. Paragliders got themselves over the Israel border, and they invaded a variety of different areas, primarily on the southern part of Israel. And one of the ones I think a lot of people have seen on the news has been a music festival where there weren't even Israelis there. There were people all across the world, Germans, everyone celebrating like life. It was a music festival, right? They were just dancing. And many of them murdered, kidnapped, taken into hostage, etc. So at the end of the day, the reason why Hamas is doing this from their perspective is they believe that Israel has an illegal right to the land that they have occupied, that Palestine should be given freedom. Essentially, Palestine has been in the Gaza Strip, has been an occupied territory from Israel for the past a long time, and going back, for many decades. And as a result of that, they want to free Palestine, which is why you saw protests in New York City, again, very close to where I live, just yesterday, right, 24 hours ago, a lot of people being on the side of Hamas and saying that what they're doing is not terrorism, what they're doing is freedom fighting, okay? That's one perspective to it. The more mainstream perspective that the UK, the United States, the French, pretty much everyone has formally come out and supported is that this is a terrorist attack. This is a terrorist attack that is uncalled for. If you do the numbers, the amount of people that have died in Israel are equivalent to the amount of people that died during 9/11 in the United States of America. And so people are saying 10/7, October 7th, is Israel's version of 9/11, given the type of death that has happened. And taking women and children and sexually abusing them and then killing them and then dragging them through the street and then uploading videos of that to social media is the most carnage type of act anyone could do. And it's not freedom fighting for the land. It is a form of terrorism. Those are the two perspectives that we're seeing right now. And as a result of that, we have obviously gotten into a lot of issues in regards to the entire conflict. Now, I highly recommend, I'll probably put it in the show notes, a bunch of documentaries I watched over the weekend, even if you just listen to it in the background around the history of why this is happening. These are geopolitical tensions that have existed for hundreds of years, but because Israel was coming to a breaking point with Saudi Arabia in terms of establishing some level of peace, some level of real diplomatic relations, Iran likely came to their own rescue and said, we can't have Israel having that peace. Now, Saudi Arabia put out a statement over the weekend basically saying, we condemn everything that Israel has been doing to Palestine for the past 50 years, and we are in support of the quote-unquote freedom fighters that have been retaliating against Israel. What that means is the deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel in terms of establishing peace is likely down the drain. It's not going to happen. It's not going to definitely happen anytime soon, especially with the counterstrike that Israel has launched over the past couple of hours, now striking many different places in Gaza. And we're going to have more and more geopolitical tensions. One final thing I want to say on this before I move on in regards to the markets is, look, the reason America is an ally of Israel, the reason you've seen every Western democracy come out and say we condemn what's going on through Hamas and we praise Israel for fighting back, they have a right to defend themselves, etc., is because Israel is the only real democracy in the Middle East. Now, they're not a perfect democracy. There's a lot of issues around how, they operate, but they are a democracy. Iran is not a democracy. Saudi Arabia is not a democracy. They have a prince, for goodness sakes. Iraq is not a democracy. Afghanistan is not a democracy. These are not democracies. In fact, these are theocracies that have Sunni or Shiite Islam law. There are two different schools of Islam. Those are two of the main ones that govern the society. I mean, Saudi Arabia just a year ago started to get rid of the religious police that would basically, if a woman was walking around without her hijab, essentially, put her in jail, or they would give her a fine or do a bunch of things that are not the holiest in the world. And so as a result of that, that is why the West is on par with Israel, because even though they're not perfect, they are a democracy, and Western values need to win at the end of the day in order for them to, be sustainable. And while there may be other democracies, quote unquote, in the Middle East, Israel is one of the best out of all of those, given they actually have elections, etc. That is why we are on the side of Israel in the context of the United States and Western governments. And Saudi Arabia and Iran and Saudi Arabia coming to a conclusion with Israel to have some peace. Iran doesn't want to see that happen. A lot of Iran does not want to see Western values win. Just a couple of days ago at the UN, they were chanting death to America. So obviously there are some Middle Eastern countries, not all of them, but some of them, that are not fans of the West. They're not fans of the United States. They're not fans of democracy. They're not fans of liberal values by any sense of the imagination. And they don't want to see Israel have a right to exist, or Israel have the ability to sustain a democratic, peaceful regime. And that's why we're seeing a lot of this carnage also coming at once. So moving on to Matt's question, is the market going to tank? That's a little bit of a background on it. Let's get now into if the market is going to tank. First of all, let me just say, the market's doing pretty damn well. I mean, I expected to see some blood in the market based on all of this geopolitical tension. The S&P is down more than 0.5%. It's bad, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. It's at 426 right now in the pre-markets. Palantir down 1.32% at $16.39. Robinhood down almost 2%. SoFi down 3%. SoFi is actually down a little bit more. And Tesla is down 1.8%. So what I'm looking at in the context of the markets is actually not as bad of a scenario as we thought it would be. Now, why should the market suffer if this geopolitical tension tends to rise? There's a couple of reasons. Number one, and I think this is the biggest one, our good friend Brent decides that he wants to raise the prices of his oil. And so Brent oil, as we see today, up about 4% on the day. That's pretty aggressive to see oil being up 4% on the day after it was down. As we can see, it was down to 84 on October 5th from a high of 94.36. So from September 27th all the way down to October 5th, we saw a nice $8 decline in oil. 6 plus 4, that's $10 decline in oil, and we're seeing it ramp up a little bit. Why would this be impacting the prices of oil? Obviously, if the situation gets worse, it's going to affect supply. It's going to affect the production. And here's the wild card that I think a lot of people are starting to recognize. If this is the start of a broader form of escalation, what that means is that, let's say Israel, they've already started a counterstrike. Let's say they really start a counterstrike. I mean, they go at it. And let's say Saudi Arabia is not a fan of that. Let's say Iran, who we already know is not a fan of that. Let's say other countries in the Middle East, Egypt, etc., are not a fan of what Israel is planning to do. Is there a world in which a lot of Middle Eastern countries team up and say, we're just not having this shit anymore, and we're going to invade Israel? We're going to go against Israel. I know that sounds crazy, but it sounded crazy to imagine Russia invading Ukraine. Remember, Russia does not think Ukraine has a right to exist. The Middle Eastern countries do not believe, not all of them, but a majority of them that have a lot of power, do not believe Israel has a right to exist. The only reason, or one of the only reasons, let me be more clear, Israel is functioning as a democracy and has its ability to exist is because they have the support of the United States. They have the support of Western countries. Iran knows if they were to do anything really bad to Israel, we would respond, and we would respond pretty aggressively. And that's been pretty much every administration in the United States that has tried to, create peace in the Middle East. We've had Israel's back for a long time, and Joe Biden, our current president, reestablished that. So if things were to escalate to any degree, oil prices would naturally be affected. Raw goods and commodities would be affected. Supply chains for all of these things would be affected. A lot of that stuff comes from the Middle East, which means inflation. And that is the number that we need to talk about a lot more, would also be affected. And if inflation would be affected, that is not going to be good for markets. That's obviously not going to be good for what's going on in regards to CPI coming down, and definitely not for oil prices. Let me just pull up these charts real quick. One of the things we saw over September from October is, again, oil declining, which is really good. The problem is a lot of that oil decline happened in October, not in September. So as a result of that, in September, we haven't seen oil come down, which is why the CPI that's going to be reporting for September is going to be reporting September's results. And September's, gas prices were still a heavy part of CPI in September. October, it's supposed to cool down. And I think if in October it's supposed to cool down, then that's actually, really good for the markets. But if it doesn't cool down in October, then we're not going to see CPI come down in any meaningful way. S&P 500, what we're seeing right here, again, down just 0.51%. That's not too bad. 427 in the pre-markets, it's at 429. What we've seen is the market's basically saying, okay, the geopolitical conflict is contained. That's the key word. It's contained. And because it's contained, we're not going to give too much stress to what potentially might happen in the broader ecosystem around oil, inflation, et cetera. We're going to let it play out. But if it doesn't get contained anytime soon, or if things, go to a different level, then obviously we're going to see some backsliding, and we're going to see a little bit more pain that we see in the markets. Ricardo, Amit, thanks for the overview and impact on the market. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Ricardo, for being here, and thank you for the $5 super chat. Really, really appreciate it as well. Matt says World War III is trending on Twitter. Same thing happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. There's no way it doesn't get bloody in the markets. And this is going to be the interesting part about 9:30 today. When February 2022 happened, we saw a massive decline in the markets, and it got pretty bad. Oil got to like 115 around that time. If anyone remembers the exact price, oil, it got pretty bad. It was not good. And as a result of that, the same thing could happen if the market thinks the violence will escalate, if Israel is going to get even more aggressive, and if other Middle Eastern countries are going to continue, which, if you logically put it together, I don't think Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan are going to be happy when Israel launches a counteroffensive and potentially kills thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in the Gaza Strip. One thing that's important to understand about the Gaza Strip, which is a small part of the land around Israel and Palestine. It's occupied by Palestinian territory. It's occupied by the Israelis, but it is a Palestinian territory. There's no Jews or Israeli people in the Gaza Strip. It's 148 square miles. I'm getting the name of it wrong, but there's 2.2 million people, and it is the most occupied territory in terms of population density. Oh, it's 140.9 square miles of land. Let me just share my screen right here. You've got 140 square miles of land, and there's 2.2 million people that live in this strip, the Gaza Strip. So if Israel launches a counteroffensive, which they've already launched, and they're starting to have a ground force in Gaza, there's going to be a lot of, quite frankly, bloodshed that's going to be happening. And as a result of that, that is going to escalate tensions. If that escalates tensions and the Middle East gets involved with that, you're going to see heavier impact on oil and inflation. It seems inevitable. Now, if the market can somehow get away from that to the point where there is not going to be that impact on oil and overall inflation, somehow we pull a soft landing to this geopolitical scenario that seems like it's going on right now, we're going to be okay. But as of now, it doesn't look like it's going to be the best situation. Let me give a perspective here, actually, to explain why this might not affect oil as much. Let's get a perspective from Amrita Sen for why this won't affect oil and why there's actually not that much downside to see.
We just heard from the Saudi energy minister right now with our Dan Murphy over in Riyadh. In general, I think we could paraphrase it as him trying to calm and comfort the markets right now about the supply of oil. We've seen oil spike this morning up about 3%. Near term, what do you see as the impact of this conflict on the oil markets?
I mean, like you said as well, look, we're not expecting any direct impact on oil markets. I think last week, as you mentioned at the start, it was a heavy sell-off driven by positioning, but also these unfounded fears about the US, Saudi, Israel diplomacy potentially leading to Saudi Arabia bringing back its voluntary cuts sooner than they had announced, which is till the end of the year. We've, in our conversations with the minister himself, Saudi Arabia has made it very clear that those cuts are going to stay. And again, I think what Prince Abdulaziz did there with Dan was very much kind of saying, look, we are monitoring the situation and we will continue to flex our production as whichever direction as required. So the market doesn't need to get worried on either side, really.
And so obviously the Saudis don't want to, shock the market in regards to oil prices. That's not going to be the best for them. So there is an argument to say that Saudi Arabia wants to make sure the supply of oil and the demand of oil, which ultimately controls the prices, is going to be stable and not bad. They are going to remain flexible, as you can see, was the key word that they used. The Saudi Minister of Oil, is that the right name? Minister of Oil, the guy who controls the oil, to make sure that nothing goes wrong. The problem here is, does their geopolitical, essentially, hatred for some of the stuff that's going on in Israel overdetermine their capacity to make sure global supply of oil does not come to a bad situation? Iran also produces a ton of oil. Iran put out a statement today saying that if the United States or any Western country were to start to act in an aggressive manner in regards to what's going on with Israel or Palestine, that there will be no red line, is their quote, and they will continue to further cause harm. And, they're going to let the floodgates let loose. Now, Iran, North Korea, they always put out these types of threats trying to sound like the big guy. The problem here is inflation is in a tough territory in Iran, Saudi Arabia. A lot of these guys control the price of oil, whether we like it or not. And so if some of this stuff gets to a tougher situation and they actually do get more aggressive, this is where it really tests the moral apathy of the United States, because inflation affects everyday Americans here. But if you let Israel become, a country that gets destroyed by Middle Eastern countries, that's democracy basically dying in the Middle East to an extent. So, how do you reconcile those types of things? Because if you don't intervene, maybe oil prices are okay. If you do intervene, oil prices spike. It's a really tough situation. And it goes to show you what Elon was saying a couple of days ago, which is that when he was creating Tesla, he realized that geopolitically, the world would have to shift in terms of power dynamics if we had to not rely on oil as much as we were relying on it in terms of Western countries. So definitely going to have an impact in a variety of scenarios, but it's going to be one of those things where I think the markets are like, hey, let's wait and see. Right now, the markets, quite frankly, it would act as if they're unaffected. I mean, down 0.56% on the S&P 500? That's a typical Monday, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks. So right now, the markets are acting like it's not a big deal. If it does have some impacts on oil and inflation writ large, and the markets can see that coming, then there's going to be some more impacts at the end of the day in regards to stock prices. Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room. I'm sure a lot of people have been waiting to hear about this. I did not tweet about this all weekend because, there's a time and a place to tweet about some of this stuff. Honestly, over the weekend, I was in shock at what was going on. I was consuming a lot of news over the weekend, trying to get my perspective on this. And I know I'm not perfect on it. And it is a very tough and complicated issue to understand, but I tried to fill my head up with as much knowledge as I could from perspective from both sides, which is why I didn't want to tweet about the company that I talk about the most. But I think it's time we discuss the implications here. Palantir. So what is going on in the context of Palantir? And Ariane comment right on time. Does Israel use Palantir as Gotham? Palantir has had an office in Israel since 2015. So they have been allies of Israel. Alex Karp has spoken many times about his support for Israel. In general, Palantir sides with Western democracy. So in a nutshell, if you were wondering or confused, does Palantir support Israel? Do they take the side of Israel? Would they lend their products to Israel? I think the answer is unequivocally yes. Again, Israel is one of the only real democracies, even if it's not perfect, in the Middle East that has embraced Western values. Remember, the United States, the reason we want to be the leaders of the entire world is because we believe, whether you agree or not, and I think most people in the chat would agree, that Western democratic values are the best of all ideologies that exist. Either you can embrace free speech, even if it's not completely free in the United States, or you can embrace theocracy governed through laws written in books that, determine how the world should act. And even though the United States says, in God we trust on the dollar, God itself or Christianity does not literally govern our day-to-day lives. If that was the case, a lot of things that are legal would not be legal. So we are one of the most freest places in the world, even though there are a lot of issues with, the way we conceptualize freedom. Palantir is on the side of that over everything. And as a result of that, Palantir is on the side of Israel. Now, the question is, did Israel have access to Palantir intelligence software to be able to potentially predict some of the stuff that's going on? It seems like the answer is no, because for Israel to not have seen what was coming, I mean, there were freaking terrorists coming in through paragliding. I did paragliding when I went on a vacation in Mexico in like 2012. I was paragliding across the ocean and we paid like $100. That's what people used to invade Israel. And it was a pretty well calculated attack. For Palantir, or for Israel, to not have any level of software, forget Palantir software, to be able to know that that was happening is just appalling. It is the largest failure of intelligence, quite frankly, you could argue, since 9/11, to not know that something like that was happening. And as a result of that, in my heart, the way my gut check is, I don't think they had Palantir's Gotham up and ready to go and they were seeing this stuff. The other conspiracy side is they had the software, they knew this was happening, and they wanted it to happen in order to launch a full-on offensive against the Gaza Strip. Maybe that is a scenario. I don't rule that out at all because I don't like to rule out any of these scenarios, even if they have a 1% chance of happening. But it becomes to the point where it's like they paraglided into your country. If you didn't know they were coming into the country, it's almost insane to imagine they had no intelligence. Israel, by the way, most people regard Israel's intelligence better than the CIA because of how sophisticated it is, because they're always under attack. They're always under warning around what could happen. So how does this relate back to Palantir? Number one, if Palantir were to license their software today to Israel, I think it would be in the context of targeting. And that's what they would be using Gotham for, potentially using it in the context of trying to make sure they could figure out where different attacks are coming from. Palestine and Hamas is not Russia invading Ukraine in the context of they're not as big of a military. So I don't know if they would need, that much software to be able to do that much counter attacking, because there's just not that much coming from Hamas. I don't even know how many people invaded Israel from Hamas, but it's definitely not, hundreds of thousands of troops from Russia. So I don't know if their software would be as useful now. Their software definitely would have been useful before to stop it from happening. So for all the people that are like, oh, Palantir software not that important, it doesn't matter. It's like, no, a lot of the reasons we didn't have a lot of right-wing terrorism attacks in Europe is because we had Palantir software in place to make sure that those things couldn't happen. You need a lot of that software to stop things from happening before those things happen. So the question becomes, are they procuring Palantir software right now? I have no idea. I do think it would be effective if they use some of their software. I don't know if it would necessarily have the same impact that Ukraine is having in terms of protecting their entire sovereignty against Russia, because that's like a full-on war with hundreds of thousands of troops. So you can use the software, Meta Constellation, etc., for a lot of things. But I do know that if they had their software before, maybe this could have been avoided. And if this could have been avoided, then it would have been obviously a good thing for everybody. John says Mossad, which is Israel's version of the CIA, is on steroids. Insane. They didn't see this coming. Complete intelligence failure. Yeah, that's correct. And I know it's a cliche thing everyone's heard over the weekend that this is an intelligence failure, but I mean, this is going to be investigated for years. Just like 9/11 is still being investigated to this day. How did we not know this was coming? Hamas is not the most sophisticated. They're not Al-Qaeda. They're not ISIS. They're a terrorist organization that, quite frankly, over the past decade has not had a lot of power. And Israel's been able to contain them very well. The fact that they were able, and obviously that's what leads to people thinking Iran gave them a crap ton of money to be able to get these things in coordination and potentially plan with them. The fact that Israel could not see this coming is really sad. Is really, really sad. And unfortunately, this is why companies like Palantir are needed. This is why, if you're an investor in Palantir, I hope you believe in what you're investing in, because you're investing in Western democracy. Another thing I want to say about Palantir, and while I'm saying that, let me pull up a couple of defense stocks. Lockheed Martin is up 5% in the pre-markets. It makes sense. There is obviously going to be more demand for helicopters, guns, military, artillery. All of those things are going to be in demand. So you see some of these defense stocks doing well. RTX, Raytheon Corporation, up 3.8% in the pre-markets at 72.42. It makes sense. The entire market's red. You got two defense stocks that are red. Palantir is not really green. It's actually red. It was at 1661, had a great Friday. It was up 5%. Right now it's 1637. It'll be interesting to see if it breaks that 1661 barrier that we saw on Friday and the market kind of recognizes it as a defense contractor. The problem with the market recognizing it as a defense contractor right now is I don't know if the market is going to think that Israel will be procuring Palantir software at this stage. I think the market obviously understood that was happening with Russia-Ukraine, and the reason for that is because the guy met Zelensky, right, when we're talking about CARP. So it was pretty obvious. And even then, we didn't get a boost. All of 2022, we stayed at $6-7 until we became gap profitable. So I am a bit skeptical that the market's going to think, oh my God, Palantir is going to be used right now. Their software is going to be in high demand. Let's give them, some premium. Given the stock's already at $16, maybe that happens. And if that does, that's awesome. I don't really know if this is the same scenario as Russia-Ukraine. Again, even after Russia-Ukraine, it took a year until the market gave Palantir the premium after they were gap profitable. So we'll see what ends up happening here. But one thing on Palantir is Alex Karp, for the past 2 years, has been saying on every single conference he goes to, we are entering a world that is more divided than ever. The interview he did with Stanley Druckenmiller, that was about a year ago, was essentially, look, the geopolitical tensions not only are rising, they're rising because we are having a clash of value systems. Do we believe in democracy, freedom, liberty, the pursuit of happiness? Or do we believe in authoritarianism? Or do we believe in theocracy? Like, what do we believe in? And at the end of the day, the stuff we're seeing with China and Taiwan, with Russia, Ukraine, like one of the reasons maybe Hamas felt they could go back against Israel is because of some of the counter stuff they've been seeing in Russia, Ukraine. Like these values, either they're going to win or the United States values are going to win. I mean, for goodness sake, we fought an entire world war to stop Nazi Germany from winning. Because if Nazi Germany and fascism had won in the 1940s, we would have a totally different planet. If that was the rule of law, if the idea was you could exterminate a group of people just because of the color of their skin, so we fought these wars because of these value clashes. And what Palantir's bull case to me has always been, when the world gets less deglobalized, more deglobalized, and when the world becomes more in confrontation with each other, businesses have to have a data-driven approach to learn how to navigate that. Think about how many companies are in Israel, how many software companies operate in Israel. Israel has a ton of coding expertise. There's so many things that just got flipped overnight, just like what happened in Ukraine. And governments have to act in a fundamentally different way. This is why CodeStrap said NATO is a $100 billion market for Palantir. Because think about every NATO country that loves freedom, liberty, democracy, the ability to pursue happiness. All of that is under threat if you see certain regimes that have particular value systems win. Not just hurt another group of people, but actually win in terms of their ability to invade other countries. And so the bull case for Palantir has always been, to me, it is a hedge against a potential world in which freedom, liberty, humanity, the pursuit of happiness, Western values aren't winning, because Palantir software is inextricably tied to making sure that Taiwan doesn't get invaded, that Ukraine protects their sovereignty, that a country like Israel hopefully can recognize when these terrorist attacks are going to happen. And that's the bull case of Palantir. So at the end of the day, I think this is going to have an impact on Palantir. I do think the stock is trading at a little bit of a premium, so I don't think their stock is going to get a ton of valuation boost from this, particularly because I don't see the Israel scenario being a massive catalyst for Palantir software to be procured currently, either from Israel or from other governments. In the long term, yes. In the short term, I don't know if that's going to be the argument. Whereas Russia-Ukraine, I thought immediately, Palantir was in Russia-Ukraine. And even then, again, the market didn't give it a boost. So we're going to see how the market interprets what's going on here. 9:30 is going to be very, very interesting. And whatever ends up happening, then we're going to see how the market decides to value it from there. Peter, thank you for the $5 super chat. Amit, was Palantir already established in the Ukraine prior to the invasion? If not, wouldn't Palantir entering to the Israeli conflict make sense? Good question. Yes, Palantir was not established in Ukraine, to the best of my knowledge, before the invasion. They came after the invasion. They came within a couple of days. If not, would Palantir entering into the Israeli conflict make sense? Logically, yes. The problem is it's not an entire country invading Israel. It's a terrorist attack that one could argue. I mean, Israel has called on 300,000 troops to start their counter-offensive against Hamas. I don't even know if Hamas at 3,000 people invade Israel, quite frankly. I have no idea. So I don't know if the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel is a full-on type of invasion that Russia is pulling in Ukraine in terms of its magnitude and scope. And as a result of that, I don't know if you necessarily need that much software, that much defense intelligence to be able to go up against Hamas, or if Israel can handle it themselves. Maybe you do. And then the procurement of Palantir software makes sense. But if you don't, then there's not necessarily, one could argue, that much need for that software, which means, maybe they're not going to be involved. So we'll see. I also think the best time for their software was before this happened in terms of intelligence. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it ends up playing out. Gut feeling, yes, they should be talking to Palantir. However, I don't know if they necessarily need it, given how bad Russia-Ukraine was, and maybe this is not necessarily the same thing. But ultimately, we will end up seeing how it goes from there. DRK says, I find it suspicious about how all our spy agencies didn't see this coming. Yeah, and again, this is, and we'll move on to another topic in a second, but this is the bull case for Palantir. If Palantir was implemented into Israel, I would argue that they would easily have seen something like this coming, given the things Palantir has thwarted off before in the past. The fact that either they didn't have Palantir or their current defense intelligence software didn't work, maybe that's the bull case for why you need some Palantir. And like at the end of the day, that's it's becoming so much more apparent to me that I invested because of what Alex Karp was saying, and what he was saying was not BS. He wasn't saying it to sell his stock. He was saying it because the world is quite literally becoming more fragmented. And if the world is becoming more fragmented, then obviously that has a lot of impacts on every part of the economy. Okay, let's take a quick check on the markets, and then I want to look at the 10-year yield and see some of the impacts that are happening right there. So we see Palantir right now in the pre-markets down at 1636. NVIDIA is at 449. S&P 500, 427. Again, not affected that badly. PayPal, 57. There's a class action lawsuit against PayPal. I have to go a little more deeper. Apparently what I've heard is that it doesn't matter, and it's kind of BS. So we'll see, ultimately what goes on from that. But I don't think it should be affecting the stock that aggressively. PayPal down about 1% in the pre-market. SoFi down about 2%. Microsoft down about 0.2%. Google, we'll talk about some news after the market open. On Google, 137.99. They released some new generative AI search features for doctors. Another healthcare being a big market for Google, so we'll talk about that. Meta is at 311.98. Zoom at 65. Nothing too crazy in the pre-markets. Again, defense stocks are up. Palantir is down at 1638. S&P down at 427. Looking at the 10-year treasury, the 10-year is at 4.795. So basically 4.8 if you round it up. This is going to be pretty confusing for the markets. 10-year being at 4.8 is not good for the equity markets. If bond yields are this high, again, why would you put your money in equities if you can get a risk-free return of 4.8% from the 10-year? The jobs report on Friday, some people may have forgotten, was way better than expected. Biden gave a great speech saying we're getting so many jobs and he's so happy the economy is doing well. However, the Fed was not a fan of that job market report because you added way too many jobs and you need unemployment to go up, not unemployment to be going down in order for inflation to come down. However, the market rallied. And when we were on the market open on Friday, we saw the market collapse almost 2% when that job report came out. And by the time I got off the stream, the market had rallied pretty significantly. S&P hit 431. I mean, we were at 422 at one point. That's a pretty impressive gain. And so it's kind of like good news was good news for the market versus good news being bad news. I want to give a shout out to Tom Lee because he almost predicted to a T what would happen with that jobs report on Friday. And maybe it kind of gives a inclination to think that the market would kind of be all right if we got a pretty decent job report. We're going to hear him talk in a second, but he basically said in a note to the Fundstrat clients that, look, markets are going to go down on the jobs report news because it's going to seem like it's bad. And then eventually the market will just eat that up and market will end up going up instead. So it was a pretty amazing call from him when that ended up happening. The question becomes, is that going to be able to last now that we have a geopolitical conflict that happened literally overnight? So this is what Tom Lee said. The best case scenario is a hot jobs figure, hot jobs meaning way more jobs than expected, and an equity intraday reversal. That is, stocks sell off in a knee-jerk reaction to a hot wage or hot jobs figure, but then equities manage to close higher. The possibility of this is greater than you might appreciate. That is exactly what happened on October 6th when we got that job report. Here is Tom Lee speaking around what's going on. Let's get his case for a little bit more of a bullish scenario for the markets.
I hope you don't mind, because this morning at 10:23 in the morning, you said possibly this is the flush. Bottom line, possibility equities reverse into the close. Well, it looks like you called it, Tom. What do you think about this reversal and what it means?
Well, I think if we think about the data for the past week, the stagflation story that gained a lot of prominence in the last 10 weeks, I think has diminished a lot because the jobs report showed good jobs, but soft on wages. We're making progress on the UAW strike. And then, of course, as you know, oil's come off that boil. And these are all pointing to an expansion that's not suffering from an acceleration of inflation. So I think it really helps the idea that, as you said, maybe the flush happened and we can be strong into year end.
Do you really think that this is that moment that that turn is going to begin to happen, Tom?
Remember, the Fed wants unemployment at 4% right now, 3.8% before year end.
Part of the tactical view comes from Mark Newton, but I think it was going to be either today or early next week because we had that intraday reading of the put call reach 1.97 only 20 times the last 30 years. It's so rare, but it has almost always signaled an imminent bottom. And then today, as you point out, we had a really hot jobs number, a pretty big sell-off that is reversing in the face of people still saying nothing's gotten better. So I do think the sellers are exhausted and there's a lot of firepower on the sidelines. And if a few things go right, I think we get a big rally.
I know, but the one thing that's not really getting better, and I don't want to ignore it, rates are still high, right? So we're at 488 earlier today on the 10-year, so we're at 477. So we've come off, as you said, the boil, but we've still got a pot that's really simmering rapidly.
That's right. I mean, these are very tight financial conditions. It's probably not a long-term killer if we were at 5 for years, because we know 5% is the average for the 10-year for the last 90 years. But at the moment, that change has been very restrictive. If I was to be half full on this, we know this also means the Fed has less work to do, which means fewer hikes. So in some ways, as long as the market can absorb this change, and it's very restrictive, I mean, it's uncomfortable, I think that's positive. More importantly,
now, so look, he said as long as the market can absorb this change, then we have a scenario in which we might actually inch out this soft landing. But he said this on October 6th. And on October 7th, we had an entire terrorist attack in Israel. And so this is why the macro and politics are so interconnected to the stock market, because look, the stocks would likely be doing great this morning, given the job report we had on Friday and the ability for the market to swallow that and essentially say, you know what? We don't care if there's too many jobs. We don't care if Jerome Powell wants unemployment at 7,000%. We just care about equities going higher because we are tired of these oversold conditions. That was basically what the market said on Friday. I mean, it was incredible to see the market react the way the market did to that hot jobs report. And then today, you get a terrorist attack that obviously is going to affect a lot of parts of the region. And we're going to see some downside momentum based on that. Now, the question becomes, how much downside do we really see is going to happen? As you can see, the S&P already recovering a little bit at 427.58. It was down 0.70% in the pre-markets, now down 0.46% in the pre-markets. Thank you all for joining. If you are just joining, equities are down in the pre-market. We have 40 seconds until the market opens. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict that has been going on for a very long time only has exacerbated itself over the weekend with a terrorist attack from Hamas, one of the deadliest terrorist attacks, what Israel is calling its version of 9/11. And as a result of that, equities potentially are going to suffer based on the instability that's going to happen. One other thing to mention before we get into the market open in 15 seconds, we don't have a Speaker of the House. Our House has no Speaker in the United States. And in order to appropriate any level of funding to Israel, you need a Speaker of the House. And we don't have one. And so that just adds to some of the instability that we're going to see in the markets over the next couple of days, and we'll end up seeing what happens from there. 9:30 a.m. October 9th, 2023. Thank you all for being here with me. I hope you have all been safe and are grateful for your health that you have. Obviously, things could be a lot worse, and it's one of those Mondays where you remember how lucky you are to be alive. Thank you all for being with me. The stock market is open. All right, time to wake your ass up. S&P 500, 427.69, down 0.42% on the day. Again, I think a lot of us expected it would be worse, but it is not as bad as we are seeing right now. S&P 500 there at 427. Let's move on to ARK Innovation, 38.59, down 2%. Amazon, down 1.4% at 126. NVIDIA, 449, down 1.8%. PayPal, 1.3%. Again, they have a class action lawsuit against them. We'll talk more about that. But that one is teetering on the $57 to $56 range. S&P 500, 427. Raytheon and Lockheed Martin are up. Defense stocks are up on the day. 4% for Raytheon and 6%. Look at that for Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin up $24 today. Raytheon up about $3 currently in the markets. Tesla, 256, down 1.6%. Tesla did phenomenal last week. It was up almost 6%, inching towards that 261 range. And, the thing about Tesla is they had a bad deliveries and productions report. They had more price cuts, and the market still allowed them to rally. So Tesla just holding on really well in the face of some bad reports. Obviously, the macro, not the best in the world for Tesla and for a lot of other stocks. NASDAQ, 13,328, down 100 points as we open. On the NASDAQ, it was at 13,400 before the market opened. Coinbase down at 77. Snowflake, 159. Bank of America down at 25.58. 25.88, close to its 52-week low of 25.47. The banks obviously not going to be doing well on this news. Truist at 27.09, Enphase at 118, Google at 136, Snapchat at $8.58. And as funny as it sounds, Snapchat should be a communication tool during this time of showcasing to the world what's going on in that Israel-Palestine region. And Snapchat is just disrespected because it's seen as this toy when it should be a legitimate communication tool to provide real-time updates on what's going on in Israel. The problem is Twitter and Facebook and Instagram are taking all of that traffic away. They're the real-time communication portals. Snapchat not being given the benefit of the doubt. I think if it was treated a little bit more seriously, maybe the stock wouldn't be as much of in the gutter that it is. Instacart, $24.96. Instacart is not doing well off of that IPO, down about $6 if you're still holding the shares. I think if you bought it on SoFi, I think there was a restriction that you had to hold the shares for 6 months, which is absolute BS. That's why I didn't buy those shares on SoFi. So, if you had to hold on to those shares, you're down underwater on them, unfortunately. But Instacart is now down. Palantir, 1656. Palantir moving back into the green, still down from 1661 in the pre-markets. 1655 right now. Reiterating my thoughts, I don't know if the market is willing to give Palantir a massive premium like it's giving to Raytheon in defense. Palantir is a defense contractor first and foremost before it is a commercial company. The reason for this, you look at their last earnings, $300 million out of the $533 million was from government contracts. So I think to call Palantir anything but a defense contractor would be incorrect. Palantir is first and foremost, they get their money from the government and they're trying to expand more heavily into commercial. So the market, theoretically, if they put them in that bucket of defense stocks, should give them a premium. The problem is it's not building guns. It's not building hardware. It's not building helicopters. It's building software. And the question for software becomes, is the procurement of that software actually happening? If the market thinks it's happening, it's going to give it a premium. If the market thinks it's not happening, then we're probably not going to get the biggest premium that some of these other companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin got. There you go. Palantir is now green. 1665 in the pre-markets. We're seeing Palantir get, look at that, 1670. Palantir continuing to get a little bit of the premium. We'll see how long that premium lasts, but Palantir is getting a premium from the market. This could be a catalyst theoretically to get it above $17. The question becomes, are there enough buyers at that level versus sellers taking their profits if it gets down to that $17 level? And we will see if it ends up happening. Palantir was 17 euros in Germany in the pre-markets. It was green. There wasn't that much volume there, but we did see that happening a little bit later in the pre-markets. What else do we have here? Just looking at some of the comments. Airlines are also down. Wow. Oh yeah, that's another reason. I'm assuming flights to Israel are probably not happening at that same level. Let's go. We haven't checked airlines in a while. United Airlines, yeah, wow, 4%. Goodness. United down 4%. I haven't looked at United in a long time, quite frankly. American Airlines, where are we at on American Airlines? Wow, 5%. Is it? It must be because of the conflict. That's the only reason I can imagine airlines being down that bad. The conflict must be affecting a bunch of different trajectories for airplanes and different flight patterns. That's why we're seeing that down. That's pretty aggressive. Palantir, look at that, 1680, up 1% on the day. Not bad at all for Palantir. Now, it might be kind of just general retail buying, or it might be green with these other two stocks. You see a lot of red on the left-hand side of my screen. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Palantir are a big green. Not bad at all. Palantir at 1672, S&P 500 at 427. Still down, but not down as badly as we thought it would end up being down. I want to play a clip from Mohammed El-Erian. I think this guy is one of the smartest guys in regards to analyzing the market, and he came on CNBC today and gave a pretty good sort of overview of what's going on and how it impacts oil prices in the market. Quick look at Brent oil. Oil is also up. Oil is up 3.5%. It was up 3.77 a couple of minutes ago, so not up as much as it was before. Not cracking necessarily 4%, but still up 3.5% in the day. Let's get an update from Mohammed El-Erian and see what his thoughts are on the entire scenario going on right now. American Airlines Pilots Union told pilots to refuse to fly to Israel. Interesting. So, yeah, I would imagine some of those things are definitely affecting the airline prices today.
Also paying close attention to the events in the Middle East. And joining us right now is Mohammed El-Erian. He is Gramercy and Allianz advisor and president of Queen's College, Cambridge. And Mohammed, last week after the jobs report, you said that a soft landing was much less likely, that there's a risk of something breaking. How do you now assess everything with this added on top of it?
So, Becky, given what's happened over the weekend, and my thoughts and prayers are with the families and friends of those who lost loved ones and all the other innocent people who are either missing or have been taken hostage. Look, this makes the U.S. outlook even more difficult. I think the key question, and you've got some
pounds are now at 1692, up 2% in the pre-market or in the market.
Some really good guests coming up. Is this conflict contained, or does it bring in other parties? So far, the markets are trading as if it's contained. But if this expands and brings in other parties, then the outlook is for even a weaker global economy, even more inflationary pressures, and the markets are going to be finding it hard to deal with that.
Look, there's the idea that's been not 100% confirmed at this point, but a very likely idea that we've already got Iranian involvement with this. So if Israel retaliates against the Iranians, is that what you're talking about by expanding?
So you can see a scenario, and again, you have other people who can speak with more authority, a scenario in which Israel retaliates against Iran, Iran gets engaged, Syria and Lebanon start being an much more active front. It's active now, but much more active. And then you've got a significant war going on. And then ask the question, what's going to happen with Ukraine at this point and Russia? What's going to happen with China? So this is why the big question for the markets and for the economy is whether you get escalation. If you look at the way we're trading right now, it is a somewhat higher risk of escalation, but not significant. And that's the major call.
It doesn't even feel much.
And he's correct on that, right? The S&P barely down today. So the markets have kind of swallowed the news over the weekend and basically saying it's not as big as a deal as we think it is. If it becomes a bigger deal, we might see some more downside.
Like that. I mean, 150 points down in the Dow, you can walk on any given morning and see.
Correct. And only 4% oil up. If you look at government bonds around the world, yields haven't come down in any meaningful manner. So the market is treating this as a contained issue. And I think that's the major question that has to be debated. Does it remain contained?
What would you advise? What would you do in the markets today? It sounds like you think there should be a higher premium built into this.
If you step back, we are every day facing more and more uncertainties. And this is what you get when you have geopolitical tensions. This is what you get when growth is insufficient. And this is what you get when you get policy mistakes.
Palantir is $17.10 today. Palantir is at 17. We're going to let this play for another couple minutes, and then we will move on to Palantir.
Thanks. So yes, we are on this road where we seem to get crisis. You know, Andrew and I were at an event where we talked about geopolitical issues. That issue wasn't even mentioned. And this was a couple of weeks ago. And you had geopolitical experts, and it wasn't even mentioned. So, it's another unthinkable that has become reality.
Just in terms of how you would be looking at this, some people have pointed back to the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Other people look at this and say, okay, you're running into trouble from maybe not great financial crisis levels of things, but the idea that things break. I mean, that's what you were talking about last week. What do you look out and think could potentially break?
So last week when I was talking about this is because you had the combination of three things. You had a significant move up in yields. Since the end of the second quarter, the 10-year had moved up 100 basis points. That is a significant move. You had a significant move up in oil, and you had a significant move up in the dollar.
All right, so market's moving up. Palantir is right now, it just went below 17. It was just, it's at 1701 right now. There you go, folks. 1706 right now for Palantir, up 2% on the day. We are seeing it more green. What Mohammed El-Erian was saying is actually tied to what's going on with Palantir. The markets are acting as if this situation is contained. And because they're acting as if this situation is contained, oil, even though it's up 4%, the Dow down 150 points, it's not enough to the point where it's some catastrophic, cataclysmic event like February 22 was with the Russia invasion of Ukraine in terms of its effect on the markets. Obviously, horrible event. None of us want to see it happen. But in terms of how the markets are reacting, they're not acting as if it was as bad as what happened back in February 2022. So we are seeing Palantir go up right now at $17.09. I talked a little bit about it in the pre-markets for why Palantir might be getting a premium. But again, look at the stocks that are green. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Palantir. Palantir now at $17.16. When companies are seen as having more demand, given a certain geopolitical event happening, the market's going to give them a premium because the market's trying to hide. The market doesn't think Nvidia is going to benefit from this. The market doesn't think PayPal is going to benefit from this. And look, maybe Palantir doesn't even benefit from this, but the perception that Palantir is going to play a role in a more geopolitically divided world is absolutely top of mind in regards to every institution, I believe, that thinks about Palantir. And so some of this momentum, it might be retail, probably volume right now. We're seeing 12.35 million shares have been traded in the first 12 minutes of the market open. But a lot of this might be institutions trying to find some cover, potentially hedge funds that might get out of Palantir very quickly, but are definitely finding some relief in Palantir right now on the day. Rocket Lab is up 2% as well. Rocket Lab, one of those companies that it has a lot of effect in space in terms of delivering vehicles or delivering rockets, delivering different goods, different geospatial intelligence. I don't know how big of a deal Rocket Lab plays in geopolitical events. Obviously, I don't think it's at the level of something like a Starlink, but it might be perceived to be, which is why it's up there at 2.44%. Palantir now at $17.18. This is very interesting because here's the thing. When a catalyst like what happened in Palestine, Israel happens and it pushes certain stocks forward, sometimes those stocks maintain the premium they've got from that catalyst and now they grow into that valuation. Sometimes it gets sold off. We're going to see one of those happen with Palantir. And when we see one of those happen, we'll know if 17 is a trading range. What for some of the folks that are into technical analysis, 14 to 16 has been the range Palantir has been stuck in for a long time. RSI right now on the minute levels at 74. So one could argue Palantir is definitely overbought on the RSI level, and when it gets above that 70 level, you tend to see it come down a little bit. But on the monthly, we see the RSI is at 81. So the market's saying, look, the relative strength index of this from a technical perspective is very high because it was stuck within that $14 to $16 range. Now, look, RSIs and technicals don't mean shit, quite frankly, when there's a massive catalyst that pushes a stock higher. And what we're seeing right now with Palantir is the perception that the Israel-Palestine conflict is a massive catalyst. And that is what's obviously pushing the stock a lot more higher. $17 was a key level for higher prices. That is correct. Arnie is in the chat. What did he say? First time Palantir moves as a defense contractor. That is also correct. Palantir is moving as if it's a defense contractor, as if it's having the geopolitical influence that defense contractors tend to have when these events happen. Now, remember, it's really important to understand, we don't know. We have no idea what the extent of the Hamas-Israel conflict is going to have over the next couple months. Maybe this dies out in the next couple weeks and it was like a one-off, kind of it happened and we move on from it. Or maybe it's as intense as 2009, and 2012 and 2014 when Israel and Palestine were essentially at war. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, said we are at war with Hamas. He unequivocally said we are at war. This war is happening. And as a result of that, the perception is that this is not a conflict that is going to end anytime soon. It's going to be a question of how bad it ends up getting, or if it is contained, as Mohammed El-Erian was saying. But Palantir definitely trading like a defense contractor right now at $17.12. During the Ukrainian-Russian war, Palantir dropped. It is the first time they actually react as if they're a defense contractor. Yeah, the perception of Palantir in 2023 is fundamentally different than the perception of Palantir in 2022. And remember, Ukraine, for a lack of a better word, for Palantir was a case study. Even if Palantir made $0 from it, even if Palantir didn't, procure billions of dollars of contracts, giving their software to Ukraine and having Ukraine use that software, documented from Times, the New York Times, Time Magazine, all that stuff, as being effective, that matters for Palantir going forward. Because if you believe in the thesis that the world is becoming more conflicted, that there's more geopolitical tension, that China and Taiwan hasn't even started yet, and we know that shit's around the corner, then the question becomes to the market, what are the best companies we can bet our money on if we are going to have these types of proxy wars happening all across the world, because the world's more divided than ever? And Palantir is one of the most obvious companies, along with Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, that you can bet on. And so as a result of that, you got that with Palantir. Now, imagine this. Imagine Palantir maintains the $17 premium, and as Raphael says, we get GAAP profitability in November. Then the S&P 500 inclusion is a massive catalyst. Now, there are two sides to it. Let me present the bull and the bear case. The bull case is thousands of fund managers realize that Palantir is going to be included in the S&P 500, so they have to start buying the stock, which puts more buy pressure on the stock and drives it up. The bear case is it's kind of a sell the news. Like, yes, the market has to buy more Palantir stock, but it's not that big of a deal, and therefore it doesn't matter that much, and the stock doesn't move that much. Tesla went up 40% on S&P inclusion. It then came back down back in 2020. But we did see some momentum there. That momentum might exist with Palantir after their earnings. Palantir now at $17.33, up 4.24% on the day. If anyone had any cash secured puts on Palantir like me, those cash secured puts are printing. If anyone had any covered calls on Palantir at $17, you're probably sweating right now, because those shares might get called away on that expiration date. So we will see what ends up happening in regards to Palantir and NHS contract and the Titan contract. There are a lot of catalysts left for Palantir. And the other thing I want to say is that when you're investing for the future, right? And so if you're investing for the future, you're investing for a world you think the future will be in. The reason you're investing in Tesla and not Toyota is because there is a world in which electric vehicles reign supreme, and Tesla is the beneficiary of that world. I truly believe, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a Palantir shareholder, because I made a lot of freaking videos about this, articulating the same exact statement when Palantir was at $6. Palantir now at $17.40. That the world is becoming more divided than we have ever seen. And the geopolitical tensions that are rising, they're rising because there is a conflict for democracy or authoritarianism worldwide. And that conflict is going to be determined by a few winners. And I believe that software and technology is going to be pivotal towards making sure democracy wins over authoritarianism over the next 100 years. And if you believe that is a world that's going to happen, it is quite obviously Palantir that is going to play a role in that world. Again, Palantir, one of the only companies in that suite of companies that were invited to the White House to talk about AI. $1 trillion Microsoft, $1 trillion Amazon, $1 trillion Tesla, $1 trillion Google, $30 billion Palantir. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence at all, in my opinion. And that's why I think we're seeing some of the stock get some of the upside here today. Amit, are you going to DCA at this price? This is a good question. Let me talk about this right now. Let me make it very clear. I am not buying Palantir at $17.40. I am not buying Palantir above $15. Personally, and you can hate me for this, love me for it, I don't care. I do not like the stock above $15. It has been way too volatile above $15. It can obviously be sold off once this momentum dies down, or it can keep going higher. I am very happy buying under $15. The growth hasn't occurred yet from a revenue perspective to be super excited to be buying the stock at $17.18. Now, look, I think Palantir is a $250 stock one day. Maybe it's in 2030, maybe it's in 2040, whatever it may be. So does it really matter? 15, 17, 18, 20, 25, if you think it's a $250 stock? No. It's a matter of a couple of $1,000s, right? It really doesn't matter. However, until the growth showcases itself, it's really hard for me to get super excited buying it at $17, $18. Given the growth, you're buying it at almost 22 times price of sale. It's a little tough. So that's why it's tough. If you have cash secured puts. Yeah, but my cash secured puts are at $14 strikes, $15 strikes, right? So I would be happy buying it at 15 and 14 and 13.9. That would be totally fine. If I get assigned those shares, I would be more than happy. But I'm not happy buying it at 17.49. That's just how I feel personally. Some people may hate me, some people may not like me doing that. But I like seeing my money rise at this level. I don't like DCAing up at this level. My strike on my cash secured puts, let me tell you guys right now. Let me open my Robinhood. I have $13, 5, 11.10 cash secured puts. I have $15 puts on 11.10. And I have some $14 puts for November 3rd. So cash secured puts, by the way, is a bullish. It means that if the stock is above that level, you collect the premium and you get your collateral back. If it goes below that level, you get assigned the shares. But with the premium, I would be getting the shares at like $13.60 a share, right? So I would love that. Why are you saying they will print today? The reason they're going to print is because when the stock is above your strike, that means you're in the green for the put, right? That means you're not going to get assigned those shares, which means your collateral is not going to go away. That's what I mean by they're in the green. If Palantir was at $11, I would get the premium, but obviously I would have to buy those shares, right? I would be assigned. That's why I'm saying they're printing, because I'm not getting assigned those shares and I'm collecting the premium because the stock is up so dramatically. So that's why I'm saying that's there. Should be selling covered calls. No. Okay. So here's the other thing. I don't sell covered calls on Palantir. And this is another controversial thing. I'm not buying it at $17, but I'm damn sure not giving it to the market on the bet that it's going to, like the idea that I would sell a covered call at $17 last week when it was at $15.28. I mean, who would think it would go to $17.50 in a week, right? You would think the premium you're getting for your covered calls are pretty secure. Palantir is not one of those companies. And look, I know the Israel-Palestine conflict happened out of nowhere, and you kind of were just like, who would have thought? But yeah, that's the point of a high-growth tech stock. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? It's up almost 20% from last week because of a geopolitical conflict, but it happened. So if you had covered calls at a $17 strike and it's expiring today or tomorrow, if Palantir closes above 17, your shares get called away, and that sucks. So I don't know if covered calls are the best strategy on Palantir. I know a lot of people use it to collect premium. I think cash secured puts are way better, because if it does go below the strike price, you get to at least get the shares, right? That's awesome. You get the shares. But if it's a covered call and your shares get called away, then your shares are gone. Now, granted, you do get the difference between, let's say your average was 14 and you had a covered call at 17, your shares got called away. You get the difference between 17 and 14, which is fine. But then you would have to wait till Palantir comes back below to buy in at your $14, $15 average. And maybe that'll happen, right? Given how volatile it is. Let's not forget, even though we're high on the green today, Palantir is very volatile to the downside. We were just under 14 2 weeks ago. So do not forget how volatile this company can be, but you would have to take a risk that it actually gets there, right? And we don't know if it would end up happening. Boti puts high growth in quotation marks. Look, that's why I'm not buying Palantir at this rate, because high growth currently is in quotations because they haven't proven the growth. But I think 2024 would be a pretty strong year for Palantir. I've got debit spreads that are looking nice. Kevin, what are your strikes on the debit spreads? I'm curious. I'm assuming they're probably 2025 if you're doing more leaps. I would like to know the strikes you have on those and the average on that. If you're sitting on assets that are not generating cash flow to your account, covered calls addresses this dilemma. I agreed. Covered calls allows your stocks to become income producing assets, even if they're not dividend companies. The problem is that if you're investing in companies that are incredibly volatile like Palantir, and you think a $17 covered call is a very safe strike, and that motherfucker goes up to 17 and your shares get called away, that's the sad part about covered calls, right? And again, I know the Israel-Palestine thing happened out of nowhere, and we might very well see Palantir, decline because it sells off. When it happens, it happens. And if your shares get called away, that's what sucks. So, we would end up seeing what happens. $12, $22 spreads. Interesting. Those are interesting strikes. Those aren't bad. Yeah. I'd imagine those are printing today. If you have $20 leaps on Palantir, those are probably printing today. If you had $17 leaps, those are probably printing today. If you had $15 leaps, those have been probably printing for the past couple of weeks. So congrats to everyone who is up on your Palantir. Now, here's the question. Let me put this in the chat. Be honest about this, okay? Be honest. Are you selling some of your Palantir today? Be honest. Don't lie. Be honest. It's okay. Are you selling some? I don't even care if it's one share. Are you selling some of your Palantir today? Are you letting the $17 range kind of go up and just watching it and having fun? Or are you taking some profits? Because I know people at 1680, they took profits. They took a ton of profits. So I'm curious to see what people are doing. Crossroads says he has $10 leaps. Man, Crossroads, why didn't you tell me to buy those $10 leaps when you bought them? Because I would have made some money too, but you, I guess you didn't warn me about them, which sucks, but that's okay. No. I'm getting a bunch of no's, Absolutely not. Not selling, 93% up. Look at that. Congrats, Carrie. Absolutely amazing. Not bad at all. Nope. We're getting a lot of no's. Tobor says a little bit. Okay. Thank you for being honest. Peter says, no way. I love it. No, I sell at 18.20. Okay. So Dean's like, nope, but give me 70 more cents and then I'm selling. I have 6,000 shares selling nothing. No. Getting a bunch of no. Silver Fox says no. Arnie says maybe just one share to make people hate me. Only if it hits 50, I'll sell a small amount. See, this is my thing. If I'm not selling Palantir at 17, I'm definitely not selling it at fucking 50, bro. I'm holding on for the roller coaster. I'm holding on. As Matt says, I'm not effing leaving. I'm holding on forever, bro. Or at least until the gains are just like ridiculous. We are going to 20. Just broke even. I'm holding. No, if I didn't sell at 20, why would I sell at 17.15? Not bad logic. I'm in for the long haul. I'm waiting for Palantir to get to at least 19.5. Hell no. Look, I think it's very possible if the market rallies for Palantir to actually hit that $20 price target by the end of the year. The problem is there is still a lot of ugly in the macro. Interest rates are high. It doesn't look like they're coming down. Oil is going up right now. Geopolitical conflicts getting higher. Job reports not necessarily the best for the Fed. CPI in September might not be the greatest because oil was high in September. So there's still a lot of ugliness. But if the ugliness can decline, we might have a really nice end of the year rally. And if that end of the year rally, ends up being nice, then Palantir might end up doing well, just like a lot of other stocks. So we're going to see. I mean, look, it's 60 cents away from $18, so it could definitely hit a lot higher. Jason says I'm only 41. Why would I sell? I agree. Look, man, if you're under like 60, there's no point of selling, in my opinion. Like to take like if your average is at $7, I understand why you would want to sell. But if your average is at $7 and you just let the thing ride, I mean, you could have a lot of money over the long term, and it could be one of those generational wealth building companies. So, it takes a lot of discipline to not sell. It takes a lot of discipline to see thousands of dollars of gains and be like, you know what? I'm holding on for the long ride, because it could easily go back down to 14 in a couple of days. It could very well happen. We know this. You've been in Palantir for a long time. You know how volatile it is. So if you're holding, you really got to understand the thesis. And my fear is that a lot of people that are up right now, they don't really understand the thesis. And so they might take profits, which we could see. We could definitely see that happening. But if most people don't, then we're going to see Palantir being green. Bro, I'm 22. My average is 820, waiting on the long ride with you. See, I love that. I love seeing that shit, bro. I love seeing someone who's 22 years old is up 100% and they're like, nope, I'm waiting on the long ride. Because quite frankly, I know I've been playing with options. I know I've been going back and forth on some stocks, but Palantir is the one company I truly believe in for the next 20 years. I mean, like when I say that, I'm not saying that in hyperbole. I really do believe over the next 20 years, this is the company I want to hold. And it's the only stock in my portfolio that I like. You know what? I was talking to Crossroads about this on Twitter. I was saying, how easy would it be? I tweeted about this. Let's see what Twitter is talking about. How easy would it be if my portfolio was just 100% Palantir? I know that's not the smartest thing to do, but like if my portfolio was just 100%, I would be so like, I wouldn't even stress about the markets, bro. I'd just be like, oh, Disney's down. Well, Palantir, like I wouldn't care. But granted, I don't want to go 100% Palantir, but I do want to have a heavy allocation. I'm like at 30% Palantir right now, not 100%. I would like it to be a lot more and just like relax over the next 20 years and see it happen. That would be really, really nice. Okay, so I tweeted just a picture. Palantir's up $17.12. Some comments. Who would have thought? Morningwood from Andre. I don't think this rises because the NHS deal. Kevin Upper says, I hate this because I haven't loaded up enough of it a bit, but the chart is looking great. I'm not an expert on technical analysis, but if anyone's looking at that chart and if it looks good, I guess the chart is looking good. I got to get smarter at technical analysis. It's one of those things I gotta learn more about, but it looks like the chart is good. So if the chart is good, then the chart is good. Palantir saving my portfolio right now. Palantir benefits from war. Not saying that's a bad thing, just the truth. Let's call it defense, not war. This picture, price action is gonna be volatile. Where it lands is that matters. Defense stock, Papa Carp's Morningwood. I love the comments in the Palantir community. Also, I tweeted this over the weekend. Or I quote tweeted Grogu's tweet. Let me show you guys this real quick. So Grogu, he's part of the Palantir community. He says, I love the Palantir community members that share information with me on the daily. Remember, if you're up on Palantir and you're part of like this like social community we've got, I said it's the best community on X for Palantir DD, and it's truly not even close. The journey is creating lifelong friendships. One of the coolest things about enjoying the gains of Palantir is that the reason you're up on the stock and the reason you deserve to be up on the stock right now at $17 is because you've probably engaged in the crowdsourcing of due diligence for this company that is one of the most complicated companies in the world. And as a result of that, again, I've said it many times, it's the best community, I think, on the internet when it comes to stocks, because it's the most complicated company in the market. And all of us, whether you make videos or whether you put out tweets or whether you email me and you message me on the DMs and you're not that much of a content creator, you have contributed to the crowdsourcing of information that the hedge funds and that Wall Street don't fucking know about because they're too worried about short-term numbers that don't really understand the story. We do. Look at that. Entire left side of my screen is green or red. Rocket Labs, Palantir, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin are up. I mean, it's just incredible. And so that's one of the other things about being part of the Palantir community. It's just there's just so much information put there that you get to understand, and you make some lifelong friends. Like me and Arnie, we're becoming lifelong friends. We talk almost every day, right? And that only happened because there is a common interest that we ended up becoming friends over, and now we talk about everything every day. So it's really one of those things. I would highly recommend, if you're not part of the community, if you're not that active, if you're not on Twitter, like get on Twitter, make an account, even if you don't tweet, follow a bunch of people, and just become part of that community, because it's really a special thing. There's not that many things in life that coalesce millions of people together around one subject that has all these different intricacies towards it, in terms of Alex Karp and Western democracies and values and Peter Thiel, 0 to 1, AIP. There's like all the AI, LLMs. There's so much shit all in one stock that can create communities around it and sub-communities around it. I would highly recommend becoming a part of it because it's just a cool thing to be a part of. David says, hey, Amit, what happens if the war in Israel stops immediately with Palantir? Will all the gains be gone? David, let me just say, every time I pull up your comment, I think about McDonald's because that's your profile picture. So every time you make me hungry. But no, I mean, look, I don't know. If the war in Israel comes to a stop tomorrow, right, which I don't think it's going to happen, do the gains disappear? Maybe. Or does the market say, you know what? Palantir deserves to keep its premium because of what has happened. And in the future, if something like this happens, they deserve the premium. I don't know. What I can say is that the premium is pretty aggressive right now on Palantir. The market cap, 37 billion, price to sales of 23. We're at on Palantir, 22, 23. And obviously on the RSI, if we just look at that, 81. Above 70 is overbought. So the technicals are screaming and the fundamentals are screaming a sell. The problem is with Palantir, it doesn't usually play by those rules. I mean, if it played by those rules, Palantir would not be up 140% year to date at 14, even at $13. People could argue it's overvalued, right? If you're just looking at technicals and fundamentals. So Palantir is a growth story. It's a growth story with a lot of different things towards it. People argue Tesla's overvalued at 800 billion, but that's not fully understanding the story around Tesla. I think that's the same with Palantir. I don't know if the war comes to a close, will these gains go away? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're along for the ride, then you're kind of along for the ride and you'll end up seeing what happens. If you're trying to time it and take some short-term profits, I can't blame you. But all I can say is that, look, it might keep going and you might miss out. So it's really a personal decision. You have to either decide with Palantir, are you in it for the short term, taking some profits, or are you in it for the long term? And I actually, I saw a tweet this weekend by Grogu as well. A good option, quite frankly, is to have a long-term portfolio and then to have a swing portfolio. Like if you have $30,000 in Palantir, make that something you don't touch. You just don't even look at it. And then have $10,000 where you play and you swing trade it from 14 to 17 or 17 to 20 or 13 to 14, whatever you want to do. Because if you want the urge to trade Palantir because it's stuck in a channel, then just take a portion of that capital and just play with it, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I do think having a long-term portfolio locked in and not touching it and having like a code that you forget the password to, that is healthy. And then if you want to, if you have some urges to swing trade it, then by all means, take a percentage of that long-term portfolio, maybe 5-10%, and then play with it on the side. I don't think there's a problem with that at all. It's just a question of kind of how you want to play with it. Let's look at some of these other stocks. Nvidia is down a little bit, 445. PayPal, 5636. PayPal getting crushed a little bit. We're going to look at PayPal's lawsuit in a second. Amazon at 125, NASDAQ 13,324. Again, the market, if you're just joining, the market is not down that aggressively from the attacks we saw over the weekend. The market actually containing a lot of those losses, even though oil is up and the 10-year is up, and continuing to go high, continuing to not be affected, even if it's not going higher. SoFi, 784. The banks are down a little bit. Verizon is up $30.86. Instacart, 24.49. Where's ARM? Where's ARM after the IPO? ARM at 55. Oh, look at that. ARM's green. I didn't expect that. ARM is green. ARM is up 2%. Not bad. So IPO holders are still in the green when it comes to ARM. Robinhood at $9.77. Regional banks down. KRE down at 40.63. I discovered another ETF over the weekend, XLF. This is this has all the big banks. I didn't know about this one. I'm sure a lot of people did. I didn't know about this. This is at 32.78. All the big banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, are included in this one. Over 5 years, the top was 40.28 in January 2022, and it's at 32 right now. So KRE fell more aggressively. Regionals, when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, the XLF financial sector ETF did not fall as aggressively as KRE. Palantir now at $17.29. Okay, cybersecurity is up as well. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's actually check Crowd real quick. CrowdStrike is, look at Crowd, up 5%. That's another one. How did I forget about that one? CrowdStrike, yeah, I mean, is CrowdStrike an Israeli company? I'm wrong about this. CrowdStrike is definitely not an Israeli company, but there are a ton of cybersecurity companies in Israel that I have heard of. A quick fun fact: I was actually part of an Israeli organization in 2016 when I was a freshman in college. It was called Tamid, and the Israeli organization. I was the director of consulting, and basically we worked with Israeli startups and we came up with like marketing plans for them. And it was like the first year of that organization. I joined, quite frankly, because I just wanted some leadership stuff on my resume. But you know what's so funny? My freshman year of college, I was surrounded by Jewish people in my dorm. I was living in Brett Hall at Rutgers, and every single friend I had, for some reason, they were all Jewish, and a lot of them were girls. I remember specifically Rebecca, Lena, what's her name? Lena. There were so many of them. Maddie. I remember all their names. I haven't talked to them in years, but they were all Jewish. So I learned a lot about Israel my freshman year and a lot about Jewish culture my freshman year as well when I was in college. I don't know, Hannah, I remember her. I remember I had a lot of these friends. Now, the contrary, what's also really interesting is that my senior year, I was in a different dorm and I had a lot of Palestinian friends. Sarah, Sherry, Mona, Temi, all of them are girls because for some reason I just hang out with girls so much because they just like my presence. I don't know what to say about it, but they're all girls. And so my freshman year, I had a ton of Jewish friends and I really learned about the Jewish faith. Like, I remember I went to a Jewish fraternity party with these guys, AE Pi. That's the name of the fraternity. And then my freshman year, I was with all Palestinians, like literally all Palestinians. And so I got two different perspectives around, what's going on. I did debate. I tweeted about this in high school. And when I did international debate in high school, the conflict between Israel and Palestine was so strong that they did not allow Israel and Palestine to even debate each other. at these tournaments. I was at an international competitions and countries around the world would attend, and Israel and Palestine were not allowed to debate each other. That's how crazy it was. Like, that's how crazy this conflict is. So, I mean, this conflict is very deep. It goes back thousands of years, and we're likely to see some more, issues over the next couple of months. The question just becomes, what effect is that going to have on the market? But definitely had a ton of different experience with Palestinians and Jewish people. In fact, my neighbors are Palestinian where I live right now. But I lived with a lot of Jewish people my freshman year as well. Okay, what was I going to show? I was going to show PayPal. Let's talk about PayPal real quick. Okay, let's go. My guy Crossroads. Again, if you are not following him, the best account on PayPal. Highly recommend. I will put his link in the description. This guy has grown like crazy. He was at like 100 followers like 3 months ago. He's at 2,174, and because he's been putting out amazing content around PayPal. So definitely recommend following this guy. Okay, where is his post on the okay, here we go. The lawsuit. We're going to talk about this. Real quick, Mateo says, my senior year, I lived with a Palestinian guy and a Jewish dude. We let them debate it out every night. Bro, okay. So I'm not going to get into specifics about what my Jewish friends used to tell me my freshman year about Palestinians and what my Palestinian friends used to tell me about Jewish people my senior year. But let's just say I definitely got both sides of the aisle. And I would like to say I am going to stay my ass in the middle, because the amount of emotion that they had. I mean, I brought it up one day just to bring it up, just to ask what they would say. And for the next 3 hours, I'm getting a history lesson from both sides. And it's tough, man. Like, they don't like each other, bro. You think Republicans and Democrats don't fuck with each other? That's nothing compared to the Israelis and Palestinians. And, it's one of those things that there's likely not going to be a solution to ever. And the question just becomes how bad is that going to have an impact on the markets, and ultimately where that's going to go from there. So definitely not the best thing for what we see in regards to geopolitical conflicts. All right, PayPal. So Crossroads says, PayPal, a class action lawsuit was filed against PayPal yesterday. It's likely to make zero impact on PayPal outside of yesterday for years. If everything goes against PayPal, they'll take a one-hit term eventually. So they're being sued for anti-steering, attacking behavior that is exceedingly common in the payments industry. PayPal tells a vendor that if they want to use a branded PayPal or Venmo, they can incentivize or steer a customer to a different payment method, but they have to offer PayPal on equal footing. So they're being alleged that PayPal and Venmo has higher margins than other payment options. Merchants do not pay the cost of PayPal's anti-steering rules. Consumers do. Customers don't have a free and informed choice. PayPal rules cause an inhibited choice among market alternatives. And new entrants in the e-commerce market generally become co-conspirators, agreeing to PayPal's anti-steering rules. This sounds like the FTC lawsuit against Amazon. Okay, I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but it seems like it's nonsense. Crossroads says, this is not going to impact PayPal beyond today, at least not for years. The case wouldn't go either way, but I'm guessing the precedence of the Supreme Court Amex decision weighs far more heavily. This case could go either way, but has zero impact on PayPal. Okay. I'm trusting Crossroads. I think it's going to have zero impact on PayPal as well. Look, a lot of these class action lawsuits that end up happening, they have to show an impact on the consumer. And at the end of the day, consumers not having choice for payment processing, that's probably not going to be the biggest issue in the world. Okay, it looks like we got some more Palantir news. What do we got? We got some more Palantir news. Hold on. What's going on? What's going on? Oh, shoot. Hold on. Whoa. 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 We've got a new product by Palantir. Palantir up $17.50. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new product by Palantir. We have a video. I'm pulling up the video. We have a video, a new product by Palantir. Here we go. We're going to let this play. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new product by Palantir. Here's the video. Let's let it play. Here we go. Okay. It's around mixed reality. Do you guys hear this? Oh, why don't you guys hear this? I don't even hear this as well. Okay, let me go to the actual, let me go to the tweet and then we'll get into the video. I don't know why the video is not playing. So today our team at Palantir announced two powerful mixed reality products. Okay, here we go. Here we go. The first is the Palantir Mixed Reality Service, an open, extensible data service built to enable all mixed reality applications with human-driven data, AI-assisted actionable insights. Palantir's mixed reality service is powered by the Foundry Service Mesh and Ontology Software Development Kit, OSDK. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Developers on all platforms can add Palantir-grade decision-making to client applications with only 4 lines of code. Additionally, we launched the first Palantir Ontology-powered mixed reality application. They call it Immersive Command and Control, IC2. IC2 delivers rich integration with the entire data enterprise. IC2 enhances command and staff duties in the Joint Operations Center. It can be deployed in expeditionary environments at the points of need. The solution amplifies the mission command function by increasing situational awareness, command and control, and access to high-fidelity terrain data. The mixed reality and IC2 are natively open, extensible, and deployable now on all major devices and platforms. It looks like Palantir is launching software for mixed reality devices. They're not launching the actual hardware, but whatever devices are being used on the battlefield, they are launching software that is equivalent to be able to work with VR and AR devices. So here's the LinkedIn video. This is pretty damn interesting. Let me play it right now. I don't think there's any volume, but we can just watch it. Okay, so there's no volume. That's a problem with LinkedIn. That's not a problem with my computer. That is the announcement. That is the announcement. I'm looking while the video is playing. I'm looking on their website if they announced this as actual news. No, they haven't announced it as news yet. They haven't announced it as news yet. Wow, look at that. Okay, so oh wow, look at that. Look at that. Hold on, right here. So they are agnostic to the type of device you're using. Android, Microsoft, or Apple. It doesn't matter. You see they have the Vision Pro, the HoloLens, and whatever Android came up with. So integrating Palantir data into, so this is for people on the battlefield. They're not trying to compete on the devices element. They're trying to compete on the software side that the devices are ultimately going to be using. Wow. This is this is pretty interesting. Palantir, let's move on to the stock. Ladies and gentlemen, Palantir is at $17.63. We are up 6% on the day. There you go. There you go. Look at that. Look at that. Wow. Wow. Goodness gracious. There you go. We're up 6%. 1765. And it doesn't look like it's slowing down. Look at that. Absolutely amazing. I think this is a reason. I think this is partly because of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The announcement is not a major PR about mixed reality. We kind of knew about it as well in the Palantir community. We've been digging and we've been seeing they're doing something like this. It's not an official announcement, so I don't know if the market's reacting to this mixed reality stuff because it's on LinkedIn, right? Like on LinkedIn, they announced it, which is not as official as one would argue. But it is definitely a pretty big announcement. The question becomes, how big can that business become? There's a lot of questions going into earnings. There's a lot of questions going into earnings in terms of new products, what Palantir is going to be able to show, how they're interacting. Oh my, this is pretty exciting. Palantir right now at $17.66, up 6.3% up on the day. Look, congrats to shareholders. This is pretty amazing. This is pretty incredible. My Palantir calls are soaring. Let me know if you have any Palantir leaps in the chat and what strikes. Because if you have $10, $15, even $17 leaps, they are likely printing today. They are, you should, they might end up sending a fax to you because that's how hard they're printing. I have a feeling Palantir will touch 1780 today. It's very possible. 12 cents away. 12 cents away. 38% gain on my portfolio. It's not even 11 a.m. yet. That's incredible, bro. That's just crazy looking at your portfolio being up that much. $10. Oh, so Bayray, how much are you up on those $10 January 2025? You must be up like 200%, right? Something like that. That's how much you're up. It'd have to be something like that. Palantir now 1768. Congratulations to you, Amit. I bought. Thank you as well. 750 strike. Wow, look at that. 750 strike expiring January 2024. How much are you up on that, Haren? That must be like 300-400%. That must be some crazy number. Up 6x on my calls. Goodness gracious. Up 200%. Look at that. Look at that. Just absolutely incredible. And then you got Walter White in the chat saying sell. Palantir breaking 1770. Look at those sevens. Look at those sevens. If it hits 1777, I'm going to feel like I'm in Vegas, baby. Look at that. 1770. What a sexy number. What a sexy number. 1770 up 6.7%. Absolutely gorgeous. The one thing about Palantir, when it runs, you might as well call that motherfucker Usain Bolt, okay? Because it runs. It runs. It decides to run. Now, when it goes down, it also goes down, okay? So there's two sides to it. But when it runs, it runs. And now the question is just, when it capitulates, when it runs. I'm up 400% on January 2025 $10 leaps. Goodness gracious. This is great. I'm so happy you guys are doing well. I'm so happy. This is great. Up 110% on my shares. Incredible. I have 3,000 shares for those who keep asking. 3,000. I know a lot of people keep asking. 3,000. I've said it many times. 3,000 shares. $15.28 is my average. So I'm up as well. Obviously, my average is not as great as some of you guys. Remember, my average was 25 at one point. So I've lowered it significantly. But, it is what it is. At the end of the day, becoming part of this community has been the biggest really reward for me. And if you think the stock's going to be 250, 15, 17, 18, 20, it really doesn't matter. You're going to get a 10x, 20x regardless. And it's one of those companies I believe it can happen to. I really do. And I know on a green day, it sounds like you're very biased when you're saying that. I get it. But the reason I've held on is because I believe it can happen one day in the future. You just got to give it more time. That's it. I know Mateo's laughing because I'm like, well, my average is 15, 20, but the community. Oh boy. Look, it sucks, man. In 2021, I was buying it when I didn't know what a market cap was. And so granted, they were growing way more than they were growing, but it is. And the problem is I got so bullish at $8, at $7. I got skeptical because I was so bullish. And so I got skeptical of the stock. When in reality, it's a lesson to me. If you're that fucking bullish, buy the stock that you're bullish about, right? Don't be so scared to do it. So it is what it is. But I agree with Hexon. Anything under 30, I would say anything under 20, long-term to me is a steal. But, overall, it is what it is. It takes time. The good thing is we're seeing some momentum. And that momentum, you want to have some of that momentum sustain itself. Now, the problem is, look, it could sell off, okay? That is the thing. I think it's very important with the jubilee that we're having as shareholders. We have to remember, look, it could definitely sell off. I mean, some of these price levels are very aggressive for Palantir. The question becomes, does the market give it the premium because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that unfortunately we're seeing fold out for the long term, or does the market take it away? So we're going to have to see. Nah, bro, the stock price made you skeptical. Let's be real. No, 100%. The stock price also made me skeptical as well. 100%. Look, at $8 when it was barely growing, yeah, you're going to be skeptical, right? $7, all that stuff. And so, I was incredibly bullish about the company, but there was arguments that it was overvalued, and that was tough. I think at the end of the day, if you believe in a company like Google, people could say Google is overvalued right now. If you believe in Google, it's not overvalued. You believe in Google for the long term. And so I think that's the same for a lot of these companies at the end of the day. You had enough conviction to hold all the way down as well. Yeah, I think I tweeted picture. I was down $50,000 on Palantir at one point. Like, it was bad, bro. It was pretty bad. I was down $50,000. I've shared these screenshots on Twitter from December 2022, January 2023. I was down. It was bad. But if you have conviction, you hold and you let it happen. And at that time, I was DCAing as well. Again, my DCA wasn't as aggressive to get my stock to go below a $15 average, but it was still pretty aggressive. This is the best comment of the day. I believe in Palantir more than my girl's relationship with me. Bro, to be honest, a lot of things end in divorce. So quite frankly, maybe your relationship with Palantir might last longer than you and your girl. I'm sorry. It happens. It fucking happens. It happens. So you never know. All my conviction is in PayPal right now. Yeah, and see, this is the right thing to do. If all your conviction is in one stock, you go for it. And this is not my advice. This is Stanley Druckenmiller's advice, right? Like you go into a stock. By the way, that guy sold out of Palantir at $8. You talk about someone that didn't have conviction. Stanley Druckenmiller, one of the best investors of all time, sold most of his Palantir, I think like a couple million shares at $8. So Shout outs to Stanley. Good job, Brody. You missed out, unfortunately. So even the best of the best investors can't hold on. Okay, so there's some more news. Sparta Science is joining Palantir's FedStart. I'll probably do a video on that. I'll go a little bit more deeper into that, and I'll try to find some knowledge on that. But see, the thing that we're seeing here with FedStart. Yeah, here we go. Here's the news. Sparta Science. For those that don't know what FedStart is, the TLDR, Palantir now passing $17.80. Palantir at $17.80. The TLDR is that defense technology in general is having its heyday in terms of investing. VCs are funding into it. Institutional investors are funding to it. Geopolitically, we're seeing what's happening. Every venture capitalist is trying to find the next Palantir. Guess what? If you're a public market investor, you don't need to find the next Palantir because it's right in front of you. And so when they created FedStart, which is basically allowing all these defense tech startups that are raising money from VCs to be able to access the public markets, to access governmental entities, they need something like a Palantir FedStart, which is containerizing your software and then giving IL level 6 accreditation. Sparta Science is another company, a leader in movement health technologies, partnering with Palantir's FedStart program to operate at an impact IL level 5. I am so freaking happy that Palantir launched FedStart because they saw what was happening. Again, FedStart is a SaaS offering that accelerates and expands access to federal government customers by enabling Sparta Science to run its platform within Palantir's secure and accredited environment. They knew that this was happening, just like they saw AIP was happening, and they acted really, really quick. I mean, within a couple of months, FedStart was up and running, and now it has clients. And how much additional revenue is that bringing into the top line? I don't know. But the point is, it's bringing in money. It's bringing in a lot of money. And it's another revenue stream that didn't exist a couple of months ago for Palantir. Absolutely incredible. Right now, Palantir, look at that, 1777. Got the Vegas numbers, 1777 up for Palantir. Again, I want to say all this is on the backdrop of really horrible news that we got with Israel and Palestine, and I talked about it for the first 20 minutes of the Market Open stream. However, this is why a company like Palantir is needed at the end of the day. You know, as bad as that violence is, in order to stop that violence from happening, you need companies and technology like Palantir. And all the nonsense we have going on in the United States about, lack of patriotism and all this internal fighting, all this bullshit we have, at the end of the day, like if we can't recognize that software and technology is actually what's going to help us stop bad things from happening, then as a country, we're not going to advance. And I think most institutional investors are starting to recognize that's something where money needs to be allocated to at the end of the day. And that is where companies like Palantir benefits. I mean, what do you think of the solar market? ETFs like TAN are down 30 to 40% since August. The solar market is going to be screwed until the Fed lowers interest rates. So I personally am not buying Enphase. I have a couple of shares, but solar is not something I'm excited for because if interest rates are high, no one's going to finance solar. It's just that obvious, So I think long-term solar is fine. And if you're a really long-term investor, dipping your toes into solar is fine, but it's not something I'm excited about. It's definitely, this is why when I get into arguments with Vitaly and Carlos about on Financial Keys, if you guys are familiar with that podcast, and they're like, what's the catalyst that's going to bring Palantir up? What's that thing? Because solar, you only have 4% penetration on solar. Every house in the world is going to need a solar panel. So that's why we invest in solar. What's the thing for Palantir? It's like, I don't think you guys have studied what's going on around the world, even though there's wars happening, there's proxy wars happening, there's billions of dollars going into defense tech. And on top of that, there's a fourth industrial revolution with two letters called A and I that is at the epicenter of all of that happening. Bank of America put out a report the other day saying that when they went to the defense conference Palantir hosted, they realized that there's two verticals where AI is actually being operationalized: healthcare and defense. And so as a result of that, when it comes to healthcare and defense, Palantir is going to be one of those winners that's going to benefit in regards to the operationalization of AI in the defense space. It's just that simple. And that's what we're seeing happening. That's the catalyst for why Palantir is up right now. Is Palantir on CNBC right now? Or did they release an interview? You guys are saying CNBC interview in the chat. Let me check. If you're talking about the CNBC interview that he did a while ago, yeah, we saw the mixed reality back in the back of the headset. We saw that a while ago. We saw that a couple of weeks ago. So That's where we discovered, hey, they were working on mixed reality stuff. But look, at the end of the day, that's my point, right? Like the catalyst for why Palantir has a chance to grow way more than solar is because, yes, there's a bull case for every house in the world needing a solar panel, but there's also a bull case for every company in the world and government in the world needing an AI strategy. And Palantir is one of those companies that matters. So, I mean, look, it matters. It matters a lot when we're thinking about this. Amit no longer bullish on solar. I'm bullish on solar. I'm way bullish on Palantir and AI. You know, they're like, what about solar? What about solar? I'm like, yeah, but what about AI? Like, AI is here. AI is now. It's happening, and Palantir should be a beneficiary of it. Now, look, say all of this. Say Palantir's up 6.8% of the day. I'm probably going to end out the stream because we've been going for about 2 hours now, an hour 45 minutes. Thank you all for being here. One thing that's important to recognize is that as green as we are and as excited as we are, it's really, really important to remember that the downside can be just as violent. And I think I have an obligation to say that because it's not just, roo, roo, rah, rah when Palantir is green. It can come down. It can sell off. The bear case would be it sells off because people take their profits and they're like, all right, we're good to go. The bull case is the market recognizes that Palantir is a legitimate defense contractor that deserves a premium. And that in the face of a high RSI and declining revenues, Palantir is able to convince the market that this premium is justified because the growth will be there. That's the bull case for Palantir going up. The bear case is it sells off. Either way, if you're in it for the long term, you don't have to worry about selling. If you want to take some short profits, I don't blame you for taking your profits. You have to make that decision yourself. But Palantir is close to our 52-week high of $20.24. I know it's still $3 away, but it's closer than it was last week, and we'll see what happens. We'll see where it goes from there. Let me do the word of the day. I'm very interested to see what the word of the day is going to be. And then we'll get you guys out of here. Okay. The word of the day. Emil says my 7,000 shares does good. See, I'm so happy for people that have a real hardcore long-term portfolio and can just look at it and benefit from it, right? And that's kind of my goal is my goal is 5,000 shares. I want to have 5,000 shares and just never touch it and go from there. Chiaroscuro. The distribution of light and shade in a picture. Okay, I'm not even going to try using that word in a sentence because there's a lot of other crazy stuff going on right now. But that is your word of the day, chiaroscuro. Okay, that's it. My average is 944. I'm doing good. Fantastic. Congratulations to everyone that's up on Palantir. Please follow me on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, on X, it's in the description. Make a Twitter account. Join. There's a healthy, lively community talking about Palantir, really 24/7. So if you don't have enough coverage, you'll get more coverage on Twitter. I'll be talking a lot more about it today. And Palantir right now at $17.55, up 5.7% on the day. Amazing action by Palantir. Obviously, horrible stuff going on in Israel and Palestine. We'll be covering it more on the market open over the next couple of weeks and maybe a couple of months, and we'll keep going from there. But Palantir being treated like the defense company it should be treated as and getting a premium from the market because of the geopolitical events that are happening right now. Amit, aren't you Palestinian? I am not. I am Indian. I know people have said I look Mexican, Hispanic, Palestinian, but I'm Indian. I have Palestinian friends. I have Jewish friends, but I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those races. All right. That's it, folks. Thank you for joining. Have a great day. Appreciate you being part of the market open. I'll have a video highlighting a lot of the stuff we see going on in a couple of hours. Please make sure to watch that video. Please like, please subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow on the market open. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.